Welcome. Today's guest is Aaron Neuenschwander. Now, Aaron is one of the founders of Readeo, along with his brother Cody. And what Readeo is a platform that's online that allows you to have a combination of video chat plus reading books to grandchildren or children that enables you to keep that connection and that enjoyment of reading to those kids, even when you can't be in the same room, same state, same country even. So we're going to talk about where Readeo got its start, how it's evolved over the last few years. You guys are going to be interested in learning more about this company because if you have grandchildren that are in remote parts of the country or world even, this may be an application and a tool that you want to check out if you want to enjoy sitting down and reading, but you just can't be physically present with them. It's a great way to talk to kids, interact with them, and as you guys are going to discover, it's just a fascinating tool that can help build a bond between grandparents and grandchildren. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have this conversation because it's a great tool and a great thing that you've developed to help grandparents, aunts, uncles stay connected with the grandkids, the rugrats. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about this product and how it all started and how people can use this, whether they're living down the block or across the country.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. I'm excited to be here and to chat with you a little bit more about Readeo and where we've come from and kind of what we're excited about in the future. So
Sure. Now take me back to where, you got the idea for creating Readeo and what was the aha moment where you were like, oh, I could put a couple of different technology pieces together and develop something.
Yeah, definitely. So my family, Readeo is really, I guess, a family business in many ways. My brother and I, who are kind of the main founders here at Readeo, we grew up in a home that really valued reading, and my parents were both educators. So my mother was a high school English teacher, and my father was kind of a adjunct professor at one of the universities here for economics. And that really was kind of the impetus for thinking about Readeo, because my brother Cody, he had his first son. His name's Oliver. And at the time, Oliver was about 3 years old. And my parents spent a lot of time reading with Oliver. That was kind of their activity, which I don't think is too far off from a lot of grandparents and sharing, that kind of shared love of books, and especially kids' books. And so they spent a lot of time getting to know each other and establishing a relationship around books. And then Kobe moved away to Chicago, which, a few thousand miles away from where we're at here in Utah. It was hard on everyone. It was hard on my parents. It was hard on Oliver. It was hard on Kobe, just because this relationship that they had established and, worked hard to build just kind of started to not be as strong as it once was. And so that's when it really hit us that, after we tried using, Skype and FaceTime and
right.
Zoom to connect with a child, which if any of you have done, I'm sure you've tried it with.
Absolutely. There's challenges there, especially when they're around 3 years old.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty difficult to keep their attention for much longer than a quick wave and, see them zoom in front of, in and out of the camera. And so that's where it hit us, why not take the technology we have, which, video chat, this was a number of years ago when video chat was just kind of starting out, and also digital rights for children's books. We were one of the first companies to really approach companies like Simon and Schuster and Abrams and these children's book publishers and ask them if we could license their content. And so we said, well, why not chat with these different publishing houses and connect, their content with a video chat application, much like we're doing now with Zoom, and recreate this storytime experience virtually or online by using video chat and kids' books, in an ebook reader format, to be able to turn the pages and share this love of reading together over distances. So now, as you mentioned, grandparents anywhere in the world, or parents or siblings or loved ones, friends, family, can read books to children online and see their face and turn the page together and pick out, any of our books from over 1,000 different titles that we have. And it's really, it's been a lot of fun to see so many people connecting and being able to bridge that distance and close that gap. And the average interaction on Readeo lasts about 30 minutes long. So, you compare that, as we talked about earlier, to trying to FaceTime or Skype or, Zoom, whatever, with a child. You're lucky to get a few minutes. And with Readeo, you're getting nearly 30 minutes of meaningful interaction. So
the thing for me that struck me is that in all the discussions about cutting down screen time for kids and the worries about smartphones and how kids, even people our age, how we use these tools, one of the big positives out of this is that for a grandparent like myself that's got grandkids 500 miles away, we can use these tools productively to grow those relationships even more, right? It's not just a FaceTime thing where you see the kid running across the room in his underwear, waves hi to grandma as he's running away from mom because he doesn't want to take a bath.
Yeah.
It's hey, we can open up the application. We have the video screens at the top. And I'm just trying to give people a visual for those that haven't checked out the application. But then you've got these books that you can go through from different categories. And it's just like picking out the children's books in your grandson's or daughter's library, because it's what are the pictures? Does my grandson's name's Charlie? Is Charlie into trains tonight? Is he into cars tonight? Is he into farm animals? And the kids get to have that interaction with you too. It's not just like we were talking about, hey, here's an image of grandpa or grandma, and then that's it. We're going to read a few different books tonight. And it almost becomes, for the way that I've been using it, is a way of winding the kids down, getting ready for bed, that sort of ritual that we enjoy having when we're on site with the kids. And I'm interested to know, too, is what the feedback has been, even with this pandemic, as we're starting to come out of it. But with so many people locked down, how people have reacted to having this tool that's available to them.
Yeah, definitely. COVID was certainly a catalyst for our business last year, as we saw some, really unprecedented growth in terms of new customers coming to our site and being interested in our service. And, we were mindful that wasn't the case for all businesses last year. There were many that were, where COVID was a detriment to their business. And luckily we were able to, have been in a position and have the foundation set so that we could grow the business substantially last year. And I think, to your point earlier too, about bridging the gap, and, you have a grandchild 500 miles away. Even for my parents, my mom lives about 20-minute drive from us here, and she loves seeing my daughter. They love reading books now, and it's maybe not culturally appropriate, nor would I necessarily want my mom in my home every single night, right at 7 p.m.,
Right.
because we have a million things going on. And it's just, I want to be able to make sure I give her attention. But with Readeo, you really can have those connections. So even when your grandparent that lives relatively close to your grandchildren, I think Readeo is still a really great tool to augment those in-person visits. I often share the example. We're from, a big Utah family here. We've got like 16 grandchildren in our family. And anytime we're all together, it's kind of a chaotic, there's a lot of fun, but it's not like my mom and dad or grandma and grandpa are sitting down with each grandchild talking about what would it be like to be an astronaut, or what was it like for Martin Luther King, back in his day as he was promoting, civil rights movement. Like these are the types of subjects and conversations that are being had on Readeo that you can't almost get anywhere else. And it really deepens, I would say, the connection and the relationship that grandparents can have with their grandchildren, because it just makes it so much easier to talk about a myriad of subjects. There's so many books on so many different topics, and many of those books will share little, thought exercises, or go a little bit deeper into, different words. Or if it's a book about an African safari, it'll share a little bit more about the animals that you could encounter on an African safari and what they're like and what they eat. These are just a lot of the fun things that you can do on Readeo. And then I would just say as well, the art and beauty of the read aloud, which is, having a book read aloud to you in this day and age with electronics and games and everything else. I think it's more important almost now than ever to have that interaction, to be able to have a book read aloud to children, and Readeo really facilitates that. So
what I like too on that point is with Readeo, it's a human voice speaking to a child, and it's not a synthesized computer voice that's doing it.
right.
It's still that human interaction. And you're right. The way that children's minds work is you're reading that book about the safari and they see a giraffe, and all of a sudden you're now experiencing 20 questions about giraffes that a child couldn't go off in those directions with a computer. It's that adult, grandma, grandpa, whomever's reading to that child has that opportunity to have that conversation.
I think you're absolutely right. And, to your point earlier too about screen time, and I think anecdotally there was a study done where they basically looked at all screen time and said, screen time is in general is just not great for kids, with the exception of one activity. And that's when you're connecting with another individual. And so what better way to, connect and to be able to augment those relationships than to see each other, to share a book that, either you loved as a child, or, that you had experiences reading, in years past, and just share that with another generation of family or friends. It's really fun to have those experiences, and the product market fit of Readeo is really exciting for us from a business perspective, because you think about all the different products that you can consume, especially as you become a grandparent, and, hopefully in your retirement, you're able to purchase the things that you want to make you happy or whatever. But there are very few products that you can buy that will really change your life to the level of what Readeo can. There's only so much joy that those new golf shoes can bring, or, that new Apple Watch. But then when you think about the ability to connect and to have these relationships with, your grandchildren, it's really just phenomenal what Readeo is able to do to help those relationships grow and flourish. So,
folks, we're going to be putting the links to Readeo in the show notes for sure. But Readeo is READEO.com, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so go there and check it out, because it's really super easy to get into and get into subscription to and to set up. That was one of the things that I really enjoyed, was how easy it was to get the account set up, and then how to walk my daughter-in-law through it so that it's set up on her side. And then, really you're just kind of coordinating times on when you're going to log in and be able to share with the children. Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the features and functions that people are going to be able to find within Readeo?
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, we try to make it as easy as possible for users to be onboarded and to learn how to start what we call their first book chat. With book chat for us is kind of the equivalent of what FaceTime is to Apple. It's what we call the interaction when you're reading the book together with another individual, and you're able to see each other on the screen and see the same book and turn the pages together. So that's what we call a book chat. When you log in, you're prompted to add what we call a book chat buddy, which would be anyone in your family, etc., that you would want to read books with. So that could be grandchildren, maybe the parents of those grandchildren. And with our family plan, it allows for up to 5 users to be on the same account. So even if grandma or grandpa signs up and they invite most of their grandchildren to join, those grandchildren can use Readeo at any time during the day. They can read any of our books on their own, or they can read them together with another member or another guest of the platform, which makes it really fun. So once you get into the book chat, you are able to clearly choose any of the books that interest you. We've got different categories. We've got different age groups. We've also got books in other languages. We've got books for early readers. So as your grandchildren are learning to read, there are different levels of books to help them learn to read. And that's been a lot of fun for grandparents to be a part of that, and to instead of reading the book to the grandchild, to have it, be the grandchild reading to the grandparent. And then we have a zoom feature, so you can zoom in on the text. Some of that font and text can be kind of small on certain pages, so you can zoom in really close, and that way you shouldn't have any trouble reading any of the pages. And then there's a pointer feature, which is kind of fun, so both sides can point things out on the page that might be interesting for each side to look at or talk about further. In one of our books, there's a ladybug, for instance, that's hidden on every single page. So it can be kind of fun to, hey, where's the ladybug on this page? And, see who can find it first, type thing. And then there's also the ability to enlarge the screen, the video screen. So at the end of the book read, if you want to just have more of a conversation, you can enlarge the video screen, which kind of takes up most of the screen there. And we also have the ability to review certain any book that you read together, you can review it at the end, so you can get the input of any of any of the children into how much they enjoyed it, and if you should rate it a 1-star book or a 5-star book. And then another fun feature is the bookshelf option, which the bookshelf feature allows you to create shared bookshelves and to add books to those bookshelves. It's a virtual bookshelf, and you can share those bookshelves with anyone in your family. So, for instance, I can create a bookshelf for my daughter, and I can add any books in there that we've read together that I know she loves. And then when my mom joins at night and wants to read something to my daughter, she can hop into that bookshelf and read some of her favorite books with my daughter. So that's been a really fun feature too. The other feature I'll just mention lastly is the bookmark feature. We've started to add kind of beginner chapter books to our site for children, that are 9 to 11 years old. which is kind of the higher end of the age group that we really kind of market to or have content for, which is 0 to 11 years old. And because we were starting to add some longer books that were maybe 100, 130 pages long instead of just 32 pages like most children's books, we added in a bookmark feature so that you could come back at any time. And if you only had 5 minutes, you could read the next 10 pages and then come back to that book exactly where you left off, the next opportunity you get. So.
Okay. Yeah. I can tell you for sure from my experience that pointer feature for people that are listening is very similar to just sitting there with a book and using your finger to point out things. Right? Hey, look at the little girl with this, the dress or the sad pony or whatever it is. Look over here. And to your point, when you're finding that secret or that hidden ladybug on the pages. So that pointer feeder, we figured that one out, and we're starting to use that quite a bit. And then even my grandson is using that around too, because to your point, 3-year-olds have an attention span of a goldfish, and he sees something on the illustrations, and then he wants to point it out and talk a little bit. So that gives the grandkids a little bit of empowerment to direct how the session's going as well. Yeah. So we've really taken advantage of it and used that quite a bit. Now, what has been some of the reaction when you're contacting Simon & Schuster and some of the other publishers about getting electronic rights to these books?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, when we first launched Readeo, which, was a number of years ago, we, for better or worse, kind of went into it without much precedent because they hadn't really licensed their content to someone like us before. I did not mention earlier, but we do have a patent on this idea of combining video chat with kids' books. And so, which goes to show that we really were the pioneer in kind of thinking through how do we, combine these different technologies and create this shared experience online. And so when we first did this, we were really just kind of blazing a bit of a new trail. More recently, as we have been pushing, and growing this last about 12 to 14 months or so, we've now added 4 new publishers to Readeo. So we're now at 11 publishers. And this group that we just added recently that will be rolling out books from here in the next kind of week or two, it was probably the quickest process that we've experienced, where I reached out to them on social media and just said, hey, here's what we're doing. We'd love to connect and, create a partnership. And then I was about a week later on a phone call with their CEO, and we were chatting about the opportunity. And luckily, the CEO had worked with a strategic partner of ours and already had a great experience with digital and, going digital with their books. And so that conversation and the partnership came together pretty quickly. Whereas some of these more traditional publishers, like you mentioned, Simon & Schuster and Abrams and Candlewick, some of them have very different opinions about digital and kind of pushing back maybe a bit against the digital trend and not really having maybe a strategy for digital as much as another publisher might, which has been kind of shocking to see, the difference from publisher to publisher and just how kind of their future strategies and just overall business strategy for moving forward are so different. But, obviously we tend to believe that more and more content and more engagement is going to happen online and be digital, and that there's going to be more interconnectedness with devices and the Internet of Things with, smart homes and the ability to, see each other through your Portal device or your Echo device with Amazon. All these technology companies, they just want to get increasingly entrenched right in your home and in your day to day. And hey Alexa, what's the weather? Hey Alexa, turn off the lights. There are all these devices and things that we're becoming more accustomed to, and we just want to make sure that in that conversation that this idea of connecting and connecting families is really at the forefront of what should be going on, and how do we use technology in a positive manner to really kind of enhance those connections and those relationships rather than detract from those. So,
absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm part of Dan Miller's 48 Days community, and there's a lot of people that are writers that maybe first time. And so going through the whole process of writing and getting in with publishers and self-publishing and existing publishers, it's an interesting, I think, time for them because it's challenging from this is the way we've always done it. We've had a profit model that's based on physical, units, how many units and what that author is. And now with the disruption, whether it's self-publishing or it's electronics, a lot of these people were never prepared for that. They never taught you how to deal with electronic media when you were going to Harvard Business School or Stanford back in 1970 and 1980. Right. It wasn't a thing. So it's interesting to see how that's still kind of a struggle for some of the established players, that they don't, they're figuring it out as they're going and figuring it out even at this date, right?
Right. You don't want to be, running the last blockbuster that's, wherever it is in Washington, or, right. you want to be innovating like the Netflix and seeing the trends coming down the pike and being like, all right, well, we know that, more and more content's going to be consumed online, that people aren't going to have to show up, and rent videos and return them rewound. And, that not only is the medium going to change, but the way people consume this is going to change. Everything was just, and now with COVID and the pandemic, I think it's just accelerated that migration online and that working from home and now working remotely and staying connected through Zoom and all these other, Google Hangouts and FaceTime and everything else. So
now, have you seen any adaptation of the product with international users at all, or is it pretty much just North America?
Yeah, we have, especially the English speaking countries like the UK and Canada and Australia, etc. So we've done quite well there. We haven't really pushed very hard in those countries. We've just, with the ability of Readeo to stay connected again online, no matter the distance, physical distance, there are a lot of natural use cases from grandparents or expats or, traveling families, etc., where, they have the grandma lives here in the States and the grandchildren are living in Japan or, South America, etc. I had a user today who just said that Readeo has been kind of the method for them to stay connected with their grandchildren living in New Zealand. And so that's been a lot of fun to see. And, we're trying to facilitate more of that now with books in other languages. So having books in Spanish and starting to build up our library in French. And, we're now getting titles in Dutch and, a few other languages too. We'll be able to push a little bit harder into, some of those other markets as well. And I think overall for grandparents anywhere, passing on generation to generation, the traditions of their family and the stories, etc. That's always been something that's been important, whether that's back before, we really have record where that was the only way that stories were passed on was, around the campfire, generation to generation, or nowadays where you may have children who don't speak kind of the same language that their grandparent does or do, and that, they want to pass on that very important part of who they are. And so they want to share a book, in a language that they're either learning or teaching to their grandchildren as well. So that's been a lot of fun to see how people have used it internationally too.
Yeah, and I can just imagine that when you're having kids being raised bilingual, having the ability, whether the kids are living in Japan, but then they're still working on English as well, or whatever the country is. Certainly children's books and children's programming is one of the best ways to do both and help those young minds be able to shift gears and between those ideas and concepts, because the books is where you get concepts and you start getting abstract thought through books. And that's where grandparents and parents reading to kids really transmits those ideas. And like we were talking about earlier, it allows the children to be able to go, hey, what is a safari anyway? And how did safari start? And when did this happen? And, you end up going down a whole bunch of little rabbit holes with the kids that you weren't expecting, but that's part of reading books to kids. That's the joy of it, right?
Yeah. And we've partnered actually with a few different nonprofits where we, give them free service to Readeo to help, just like you said, to help people learn to speak English. We've got a group here in Utah that's working with refugees and immigrants to help them learn English. And the way they do that is by having volunteers read books to, the participants and have the participants read books back to them in English. And like you said, they see the word skunk and they're like, what's a skunk? And they can see a picture of it, or they can pull it up online, and then like skunk is, whatever in my language. And so that's been a lot of fun to see those and hear those stories of people using it and mentors that are able to help teach English to, these people who really want to learn the language and have a tough time. Like you said, children's content can really be the bridge for helping them learn that language. No,
absolutely. And now, what are some of the future plans? What's on the strategic roadmap for Readeo?
It's a good question. There are a couple of things. One is ensuring that we have mobile applications out so that you can use it easily across any device. The second would be scheduling features. So make it really easy to set up those recurring times to book chat with your grandchildren or children, So, for instance, I know roughly the time that my daughter will go to bed each night, or that we try to put her to bed each night. And so kind of setting up a time, maybe once or a couple of times a week with my mom, so that we just have that scheduled out and, reminders sent so that it's just a little bit easier to engage in those book chats. And then the third would be recording features. So allowing individuals to record their sessions, great for a traveling parent to be able to, when they're in a taxi or whatever to their hotel, to be able to read a book and then have their child watch it whenever they're free. Or as a grandparent too, you can record that story and then the child can watch it whenever they want. This becomes really neat when you think about what we could do with digital memories and really kind of allowing for those memories to last on or kind of continue on long after, those individuals have maybe, are no longer living or no longer around. My grandma will never be able to read a book to my daughter because she's no longer alive. But had we had Readeo when she was still around and had recorded some fun readings of her, reading her favorite books, my daughter could watch those today and she could feel a part of grandma's life and vice versa. And there's something special there. I think we've got a lot of users who mentioned that, their grandparents would record videotapes for them or audio cassettes, and then would mail them to them, and they'd listen to them, either with the book or just listen to grandma reading a book on an audio cassette tape. And that they still have those cassette tapes today, and that they're one of their most cherished kind of possessions of their grandparents. And so we want to, think about recreating that at Readeo and allowing people to have these shared memories forever.
Well, and you hit on something really important in that as much as we can look at pictures and, VHS tapes or Super 8 or digital recordings now, there's something still powerful about hearing your grandmother's voice for a grandchild, a great-grandchild that may never have met them. But having that, being able to hear that voice and being able to connect with it and hear they sound like so-and-so. And I wonder how, this particular phrase in a family gets handed down. One in my family is home again, jiggity jig. That was a thing my grandfather said. And now I'm finding myself saying it. And my kids are like, where did that come from? And when you can point back to like little catchphrases, or, if you happen to capture them, but being able to have a recording of grandmother or grandfather or aunts, uncles, whomever, being able to sit through and read a few different books becomes a really cherished memory. And then it's also just a fantastic connection between generations that aren't in contact. Right. So I think that's going to be an interesting and fascinating feature with the product.
Yeah, it's exciting. And one of the other things that I'll just mention is around new and exclusive content. We're partnering with a couple, I would say, kind of larger influencers. So these would be like your, influencers on YouTube or wherever that have, millions of followers. We've actually got one family who's got a very large following across social media who's invested in Readeo and is going to be producing exclusive content where they're going to create their first children's book and release it on Readeo, and it's going to be available to anyone that's on Readeo. And we want to continue to create exclusive new content from these kind of macro influencers or kind of celebrity types. But then also, as you mentioned, self-publishers. At some point, we want to have the ability for people, like my sister, for instance, who mentioned over the summer last year that she had written a kid's book and I had no idea. It's been very hard for her to find a publisher, to find an illustrator. We want to make that process really easy because we have thousands of people that want to consume that content. And we can kind of become what YouTube has done for content creators or Shopify has done for entrepreneurs. We can create this platform for children's book creators to launch their book on our site and to monetize that pretty quickly. And if they do, if it's good content, that kind of cream rises to the top and they could make a lot of money from having their books on Readeo and also be discovered on Readeo. So that's kind of our thought, is that we'll have this end-to-end spectrum of the ability for self-published authors to promote and to be discovered, but also these more popular influencers and celebrities that we could partner with to create their children's book content or, different content that their followers will want to consume. So that's really fun and exciting to think about as well.
Oh, absolutely. And, not to get too into the business weeds, but as you have the new children's authors and they're using your platform and promoting, they're part of what they're going to have to do to be able to get the contracts for the second, third, or fourth books with traditional publishing or whatnot is to show that they can move units and get eyeballs. And so they're going to have to be promoting Readeo, and it's just going to be another outgrowth. And, we're talking business, but the thing is that this is a business that's helping connect people. And it's not the same way as like, hey, we're trying to sell another scoop of ice cream. It's, we're trying to build some memories and connections between generations and helping kids learn how to read and making reading enjoyable. So, there's always a business part to it, but then there's also the connection of, hey, we're spreading the good word about the application. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it's a nice kind of flywheel where we're getting more and more people into the ecosystem. And then you look at what the streaming wars are doing right now for video content, Netflix, Hulu, all those. But I think that, we're in a good position because I think, additional forms of content like gaming and all these other things, I think are going to continue to be proliferated online. And we're going to be in a good spot to continue to capitalize on this different form of content, which is, more kind of static children's books or animated children's books, etc. We had some interesting conversations with Disney. When you think about connecting generations, as you mentioned, and creating these shared experiences, like no one does that better than Disney. Well, we're doing a lot of that too here at Readeo, where we're trying to, as you mentioned, connect generations, help them feel like they're able to have a strong relationship with a grandson, a granddaughter, etc., and to make those relationships very meaningful. And Readeo really enables that at a lot of different levels. So,
no, that's fantastic. Now, as we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything else about Readeo that you would like to talk about that maybe I didn't ask you, or anything that popped to mind through our conversation?
that's a good question. I think we've covered a lot of the main pieces of Readeo. We touched briefly on the business plan, or our kind of business model, where you can sign up free for 14 days and then you either pay monthly or annually. And the annual fee is $100, which makes about just over $8 a month for that year. Or if you want to pay month to month, it's $10. But when you think about having 5 total accounts on Readeo, it's really like $2 a month for that account because of how many accounts can be on there. And then you think, we see about 60% of our interactions on Readeo being with someone else, but then about 40% of those interactions just being a child or a family reading books from Readeo together in the same room or before bed, or having, a child that's learning to read, that's excited and wanting to find new books. We, as I mentioned, partner with 11 different publishers, and we release over 40 books a week usually. And so we're always putting out new content. And that's really fun for a lot of our users, is to be able to find new books to read every time you log into Readeo. But also the other thing I'll mention is I've been thinking about it, and, children's content is consumed much differently than adults, content for adults. Like, I think of the last show I watched on Netflix. I don't necessarily care to watch that show again once I've finished it, until I've kind of forgotten about it and someone else brings it up a few years later. But with children, they'll watch the same content, they'll consume the same content every single day. And so they'll want to, read the same book every night. And we've kind of gotten to this routine with my daughter where, we always have the same book that she loves to read. And so the beauty of Readeo is you can read the same book every night if you want, or you can throw in a new book every night. And with the way we're coming out with content, you basically will have a new book to read whenever you want. So,
the thing that strikes me is on the pricing is I can't go buy a new children's book for $10. I mean, they're all 11, 12 and on up. So when you think about, if you're a grandparent and you buy like a dozen books for your kid, for grandkids, you're already well into, the cost of having Readeo, and you don't have all the features with traditional publishing. And that's not putting down going to the library and getting the Dr. Seuss book that you read to your kids that you're now going to read to your grandchildren. It's just saying that this is a great tool with many features that I know personally I've enjoyed quite a bit. My grandson's enjoyed quite a bit. It's a greatly priced product, with a ton of benefits.
Yeah, we're trying to make it reasonable. And, if anyone struggles, if they reach out to us and say, we really love to use the product, basically anytime someone, which I maybe shouldn't share here publicly so much, but if someone's like, hey, I'd love to use this product and I'm unable to pay for it, like we do whatever we can to, get them using Readeo. And you think about all of the underprivileged, underserved communities out there where books are just so scarce and, they're unable to either have books read to them, or we want to continue to do more there and innovate in the space so that we can get books to, whether that's inner city kids or just underprivileged children, to have a large library. Like you said, our library is worth, the retail value of our library is now north of $10,000. How amazing to be able to basically hand a library of $10,000 worth of books to a child with the kind of the touch of a button. And so nowadays with electronics and devices being so are kind of accessible for most, it's allowing us to do more there too. So, we encourage smart use of devices, and oftentimes, like you said, we're not trying to replace a physical book or those in-person experiences by any means. We've definitely had some of those comments on our social, media posts where people are saying, "Oh, you're just trying to replace these in-person visits and everything's going digital." And our response to that is, we're not trying to replace those experiences. We're trying to augment them and make them even more special, so that when you are in person, you have a bit of a foundation where you've already gotten to know each other. And when you can't be in person, whether that's a pandemic or distance or, time of day, you really can only connect when you have a screen and when you have internet connection. And most people will choose, I think, to use a screen and connect with someone they love if they can't be there in person. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity for us to continue to grow and build a great profitable business. But appreciate you having us on with you tonight here, Greg, and being able to chat a bit more about Readeo, and would love to, continue the conversation with anyone that's interested, whether they want to reach out. We have a great support team, support@readeo.com. Our website has a lot of great resources, really, I think, in-depth FAQ page. Our social media handles should be quite relevant and easy to find, I should say, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to find us. We should be there somewhere. Look forward to staying in touch, and we're always looking for new and innovative ways to connect. So this is a fun opportunity for us. We haven't really done many of these podcasts yet, but definitely love being on a podcast like yours and reaching the audience that you connect with. And that's been the kind of more challenging part for us, is where do we go to get in front of, the aging population, the population that has, grandchildren and wants to stay connected. So we're always looking for ways as to how we can connect with, get the product in front of the right people, I guess I should say. So.
Well, and from my perspective, what the Cool Grandpa podcast is, I'm looking for tools, not just the stories about grandparents and grandchildren and the influence that is there. That's the primary purpose. But I also want to give people tools that they can use to enrich those relationships. And so, Aaron, I really appreciate you spending time with us talking about Readeo. And we're going to put all the links in the show notes. And folks, please go check it out. See if it's something that fits with what your needs and what your goals are with your relationship with your grandkids. So,
yeah. And as I mentioned, we've got a 14-day free trial, and then we have a money back guarantee as well. So it doesn't get much better than that. I think if at any time you're having an issue or you want a refund, we'll, no questions asked, just kind of refund you your money. So we're confident that you'll love it and want everyone to try it out. So
Well, thanks for being on, and hang on a sec. I'll say goodbye off the air. Wow, what a cool company and cool concept that Aaron and his brother Cody have got going on. What I like about this is that Aaron talked about how Readeo is not just another digital application or something here to take the place of that personal interaction between grandparents and grandchildren or parents and children, right? So Readeo is here to augment our relationships. When I can't be with my grandson 500 miles away, I can use Readeo to sit down and talk with him and read him a book and then build that closeness. I can figure out what's going on in that 3-year-old's little head. And so when I come up for my visits, I know what he's into. I know what to expect. I know what kind of books he likes and where his head's at in terms of concepts and in terms of understanding the world that he's growing into. What I want you guys to do, though, is do me a favor. I've partnered up with Readeo, and I have an affiliate link on my Cool Grandpa website. So I want you to go to cool-grandpa.us. Right at the top, it's the affiliate links is the third tab in. Click on that, and then there's a link to Readeo. So if you click on that link and use what's provided to you, then that helps me out a little bit with deferring some of the costs of hosting this podcast and the website hosting fees that I have going on. So it doesn't cost you any extra, but it helps me out a little bit with the expenses that I have for this program. So again, if you're interested in Readeo, and I strongly recommend this product if you have grandchildren that live away from you, or even if you're a young family and you just want something that you can stay in contact with while you're on a business trip or vacation and you're away from the kids, go ahead, click on the affiliate links on my website, and then click on the link for Readeo. Sign up, and as Aaron said, there's a 14-day free trial period where you can try it out, find some books you like, see how easy it is, and then if you like it, you just stay with it. If you don't like it, then you get your money back and you just end that relationship. But I know you're going to like this, and I know it's going to be part of your relationship with your grandkids. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.